Of duty on March 25th. He was trying to make contact with a suspicious man in a Starbucks parking lot.
Officer Rocha has been with the Everett Police Department since 2017. He's survived by his wife and 2 young sons.
Well, this morning, police officers and members of the community from all over Washington state and elsewhere lined the streets to honor the fallen officer. Let's give you a live look right now inside Angel of the Winds Arena in Everett. This is where the memorial will start in just a few minutes. You can see it is packed, not a seat open at all.
The suspect shot and killed Rocha and then ran over his body as he took off. Police arrested that suspect after he got into a crash a short time later. Fox 13 has learned the suspect, 50-year-old Richard James Rotter, has a lengthy criminal history, including 18 felonies and hundreds of contacts with Kennewick police over the years. He is now behind bars. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jamie Tompkins.
And I'm David Rose. That memorial expected to last about 2 hours. And we're pleased to be here to bring you the entire memorial uninterrupted so that if you couldn't make it there yourself, you can watch it here and remember this fallen hero. We're also joined by Shannon Sessions from the Behind the Badge Foundation. That's a 501c3 nonprofit organization that helps support the families of fallen officers and the departments, pays for memorials like this. Shannon, Jamie and I were here doing the coverage for Deputy Dom Collada in Pierce County, literally as Officer Rocha was gunned down. You've been through a lot of line of duty deaths. What's your reaction to these tragedies happening back to back?
It was unbelievable. I mean, it was a gut punch to hear that that was what had happened, and actually kind of in denial that it could be happening right at the end there of Dom's memorial as well. It's too much.
It really is. And as we prepare to see this celebration of life, you know, what is it that you look for during these ceremonies? There's a lot of tradition that will take place today.
You know, today is very important. Grief is something that we do alone, but mourning is something that we do together. And this is something that's happened to all of us. And obviously, absolute tragedy for his family, the department, but also to the community. And Everett has a culture, their department and that community, of really rallying around, and they certainly have done that for Officer Rocha.
There has been a tremendous outpouring of community support. We saw his patrol car was parked, and it was, you could hardly see it. It was just covered in teddy bears and cards and flowers as people really came around. In this day and age, how important is that for people to visibly show their support for law enforcement when somebody gets killed like this, trying to stop a very dangerous person in the community?
It's very important. It lets the community members feel part of it. It lets the family members of police officers, whether it's at this department or other departments, feel part of it. They volunteer and help caretake for that. All of these kind of ceremonies and traditions that are happening, some you see on camera, some you see off camera, are very symbolic. From the start of wearing the mourning band on their badges to the procession, which is of emergency vehicles, a type of parade to honor and celebrate the officer, and a reminder to the community that this is what happens when we lose somebody who is serving us 24/7 and sacrificing him and his family or her family. That this is what happens. We stop things so that we can celebrate and honor.
You mentioned other departments. There are people from here as far away as New York City from the departments. We know that there are agencies like the Pierce County Sheriff's Department, for example, that have deputies patrolling in Everett so that all of the Everett law enforcement family can be here to mourn Officer Rocha. When you talk about the difficulty it is right now in finding people to go into law enforcement, does the support that people see here on television and elsewhere, does that help in recruiting, or does it scare people from going into the profession because they know it can be deadly when we get reminders like this?
Watching the people alongside the procession or seeing the people come and put flowers on his vehicle help. The officers need that, and especially over the last 2 years with everything that's been going on. This is our 3rd line of duty death in Washington State so far in 2022, and it only helps them to see that support because there's been, frankly, so little of it, particularly in the past 2 years. And then also the fact that just physically we haven't been able to be around each other as much as normal. And so for this to come around and that we can have ceremonies in person. We had line of duty deaths in 2020 and 2021. It was very complicated to try to have those services. Some we didn't have for a year after the loss. And all of these steps and ceremonies and traditions are there for a purpose.
We know that Officer Rocha leaves behind a family.
Yes.
And obviously their grief doesn't end today, right? How does Behind the Badge help?
Oh, thank you for asking. You know, when we come across this, when this happens, we respond with the permission of the family and the department. And not only are we there just for the first moments with experience and trust to help walk them through the next steps, but also Behind the Badge is prepared to serve the families afterwards, the children, not just the immediate family. It could be friends, it could be extended family, the department, and other family members of other officers.
At these memorials, there are also families of other fallen officers, concerns of police survivors. I've sat with those groups before, and I've seen how visibly impacted they are when something like this happens. Does it bring it all right back, no matter how long it's been?
Thank you for bringing that up. Concerns of police survivors, those are groups of family members who've already had a line of duty death. And anytime something like this happens, it just compounds the impact on them every time. And I can't imagine how it must be from coming right off of Deputy Collada's death and all of that, and then straight into this. For all those families that are involved, there hasn't even been a moment to breathe.
There hasn't, but why is it so important that we take the time to go through this process and to celebrate his career, his life, and the work that he did, and go through all of these steps and these traditions?
Well, like we said, I mean, bottom line is that this officer has sacrificed his life for our community. All the officers who still are on the road, and for all first responders in general, working for us when we're asleep, fast asleep, comfy, cozy in our homes. They're out in our community protecting us 24/7.
Some people might be familiar with your work. You were with Linwood Police Department for a number of years.
Yes.
And so you're very close to law enforcement in Snohomish County. I know you were in Edmonds also this week supporting their department after their officer was killed. It was an off-duty death, but still it strikes home for everybody in that department. How are law enforcement officers doing? I know they put on a brave face to the public, but you see them up close. How are they doing, and what can we do as the public to help support them?
Well, they're tired. They're very tired. And, but also, the officers I know, and there are a lot of them, they are focused on doing what's right for their community. And you know that all departments around the state, or around the nation for that matter, are not the same. Each one has a special culture, like Everett, like Edmonds, where their community does rally around them, and that is really helpful. You know, one thing I like to mention is we talk about the officers, but they're in the moment. They're there. They're doing the job, and so they know when they are doing good. They know the good things they're doing. Who I think we really need to focus on is their families, their spouses, their children. And if you know any officer, family member, you know, check on them, talk to them. They're in a position of looking at the bigger picture and what everybody is saying, positive or negative, and then with these things happening, and they have to sit at home and wait while their officers doing this work.
Sometimes we see these happen back to back. You know, I try to put my finger on why it happens, but we've had it a number of times. We had particularly the worst, of course, people remember in
Right.
2009 when we had the officers in Pierce County, Seattle, killed, you know, back to back over 2 months. But it's almost like it triggers something in the criminal mind. You know, they see some attention they're getting. So are officers more on alert than ever before right now? Because it had been some time before we had a line of duty death until the most recent tragedy with Dom Collada.
I really can't. I'm not the best person to answer that. I think that each one of them are always, you know, in a position, but certainly when things like this, particularly violent deaths like this, happen, it's only their nature to want to pay more attention and to be even more vigilant than they already are, to check on each other more than they already are. I think that that is definitely a natural progression to that.
And these memorials that we're going to see as we go through today are always the hardest for me when you see the videos and the pictures of them growing up. And you really see the human behind the badge and the heart. And it always seems that the very best of us is the one that's taken out. And those are the ones that are active and eager and want to go out there and make the community safer. And that's probably what hurts, one of the worst things that hurts.
And it shows us that these people are real people. You know, they're not just an officer. They're sometimes a father, a son, a brother, a friend. And that's what those slideshows are meant to enhance and to highlight for the officer and for everyone else, to be reminded in the community that these officers are real people. And they just want to go home at the end of the night.
Can you talk a little bit about how law enforcement will come around his family and embrace his family at this time?
Sure. So for Everett, for example, this is their 4th line of duty death. And we have the ribbons on the flag that you will see, and you will notice at the end of the ceremony where Officer Rocha's name will be added to this flag. And you know, it's moments like that and little things like that that maybe you might not notice that make a huge impact on the department itself. And whether the family likes it or not, they don't go away. People are checking on them, and certainly right now is big and busy and heavy, but we do need to focus on months, holidays, next year, the children, their birthdays, you know, all those things. And I know in this case in particular, Officer Rocha has just really been known as a protector. And so he had a lot of different people who he was close to and felt protected, not only his family, but friends. And so I feel like there's a lot of his friends and fellow police officers who now will kind of roll into that spot for his family, particularly for his children, to feel like, so they feel protected still.
Yeah, and going forward, after the memorial today, there will still be several other ceremonies. He will be added to the state officers memorial in Olympia. And then not this May, but usually next May or next year, he'll be added to the National Memorial. And I believe, as I recall, Behind the Badge always has somebody there with the families from Washington State when they go and have their name engraved.
They do.
Because that can be an extremely emotional time. You know, the kids will take chalk and do chalk drawings, you know, of the sketches of the name on there that they save and spend some quiet moments. But it does, the pain doesn't lessen. And so you guys are there to provide support for them emotionally. But it's not just in these cases. Behind the Badge is also supporting them through a number of other crises as well.
Right. It's not like a trip that you want to go on. That's not one of those trips you want to go on. But when they do get to go on that trip, we do provide that and have people who were there with them, who've been there with them all week, who've been in the trenches with them, so they feel protected and well taken care of, and be able to walk through the process with somebody who's done it before.
Knowing that they're not alone, right?
Exactly.
Well, we appreciate the support from Behind the Badge and from everybody in the community. We are going to now take the celebration of life for Officer Dan Rocha in full so that you can grieve along with the family and the department and just take it in. And we'll join you after the memorial is over.
Honor guard, uniformed personnel, present arms.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all thy sons' command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God, keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Order! Arms! Colors, ready? Seat. Dress. Cut. Color guard, right. Haste. Forward, march. The audience may be seated.
The Everett Police Department's department flag is adorned with 3 streamers. Each bears the name of one of its officers who have fallen in the line of duty. These streamers represent the spirit of each fallen officer and signify that while they may be gone, they will never be forgotten. The Honor Guard and those who worked closely with Officer Rocha will now add a fourth streamer in his honor.
Honor Guard, ceremonial, about face. Forward, march.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are here today to honor the life, service, and sacrifice of Everett Police Officer Dan Rocha. While it's true that on days like these we feel the deep sorrow of losing one of our heroes, we are also reminded of the true love, admiration, and gratitude that a community can have for those who spend their lives in service to others. So on behalf of the City of Everett, the Everett Police Department, Officer Dan Rocha's family, friends, and fellow officers, thank you for being here today. Your presence is deeply meaningful. My name is Brandy Cruz, and I'm honored to be here to help guide us through today's ceremony. I'd now like to ask Fred Zoller to offer our invocation.
Of many creeds and faiths, we have come as one today to honor the life and the heroic sacrifice of a man, Dan Rocha, and to comfort his family. It is my privilege and sacred responsibility to express the innermost cry of every heart here today with an invocation. So I ask you, according to your own faith, would you join me as I pray? God, by your grace, hear our prayer. By grace, may Dan's loved ones and co-workers and friends be strengthened and encouraged by every word and every part of this ceremony today. By grace, may the story of Dan Rocha make a positive impact on all of us. By grace, may this community constitute itself a wall of love, a defense around every law enforcement officer in our county. And by grace, may our sadness and tears be seen as they really are, the indelible marks of love. Amen.
Our first speaker today will be Everett Police Chief Dan Templeman.
On behalf of the Rocha family in the Everett Police Department, I'd like to thank all of you for being here to celebrate Dan's life and to honor the legacy he leaves behind. There have been so many moments over the past 10 days where I've been truly overwhelmed and humbled by the love and support that has been shown for not only Dan and his family, but for our entire police department. And as I look out here today and see all of you here celebrate the life of our fallen hero, community members, law enforcement from Snohomish County, the state of Washington, around the United States and Canada, this is yet another one of those moments for me. Every day a police officer puts on their uniform and goes to work. They and their families know the inherent dangers and risks that are associated with our profession. But there is nothing, and I mean nothing, that can prepare a family, a department, or a community for a loss as devastating as this. Today is about Dan. It is about celebrating and honoring his life and recognizing the ultimate sacrifice he made protecting his community. But as we reflect, it is important to know who Dan was and what he meant to our community, to our department, and to his family. Becoming a police officer meant everything to Dan. He was built for a life of service. When you think about community policing and what it means to be a true community police officer, you think of Dan. He was kind and approachable and not afraid to strike up a conversation with someone he'd never met before. He had a way of making you feel like you were old friends. Dan made you feel important, like you were the only one who mattered. He took the time to listen and treated everyone with dignity and respect. It didn't matter if you were unsheltered and in the midst of life's daily struggles, or if you were a suspect or a victim of a crime. He saw you as an individual, as a fellow human being deserving of respect. When I think about what Dan meant to our community, I need not look any further than the police vehicle that sits outside our North Precinct. This patrol car has become a tribute to Dan, to what he meant to our community. It has been a place to mourn his loss, to celebrate his life, and to share stories about how he impacted so many others. I've met dozens of community members who have stopped by to pay their respects, to show their support, or even share a story about Dan. So many wonderful stories, but they all seem to have one thing in common. Everyone spoke about how respectful and polite Dan was, and how he made them feel when he responded to their call for service or spoke to them. One victim said she called the police after someone stole a chair off of her front porch. She recognized that this was not a serious crime, but was still very upset over it. Dan showed up, and rather than treating it like a cold theft complaint and referring her to online reporting, he spent the next hour talking with her and how to protect her home and her property from being targeted in the future. At some point during their interaction, he looked her in the eyes and he said, "I'm going to tell you what I would tell my mother if she was in the same situation." And this made her feel so special, like she was all that mattered to Dan in that moment. This is what it means to be a police officer and truly care about your community. In Snohomish County, law enforcement agencies have the ability to send out customer service surveys after an officer responds to a 911 call. These surveys allow 911 callers the opportunity to rate the officer and in some cases even provide free-form comments. Now, in our line of work, this can be a little risky, as you can imagine. But for our officers, we overwhelmingly receive positive comments. I recall seeing Dan's name on a regular basis in these reports. Many people describe their interactions with Dan using words like fantastic, amazing, the best, and professional. But this comes as no surprise to those of us who are privileged enough to work alongside Dan. But there was one comment that came in after the caller had learned of Dan's passing. And she shared the following. "I will choose to remember Officer Rocha's laugh and his kindness. I will never forget the danger our officers who voluntarily put themselves in danger every day to protect us. Life is short. You never know when will be the last time you talk to someone. Leave them laughing, leave them happy. Kindness matters. You never know what they will face in the next interaction. Thank you, Officer Rocha, for your kindness and compassion. You will be missed and leave a big hole for us to fill." These are words for all of us to remember, not only when we think about Dan, but when we think about the men and women right now who are out patrolling our streets, protecting and serving our communities. It is evident that Dan was highly regarded and deeply respected by the public he served. Dan joined the Everett Police Department in 2017 as a parking enforcement officer, working as an assistant manager after he had worked as an assistant manager at the Fred Meyer store here in Everett. During Dan's time as a parking enforcement officer, he quickly became a part of a close-knit team. His coworkers described Dan as calm, fair, always willing to help, and consistently reliable. Dan was always cheerful and genuinely happy to be at work. He knew he was making a difference in the quality of life for our residents as a parking enforcement officer, but he desired to have an even greater impact on the community he so faithfully served. It was not long after being hired that Dan was recruited by police officers and encouraged to apply. This encouragement, coupled with his own desire to serve the community in a more meaningful way and to be a role model for his two sons, Thomas and Harrison, led him to apply to become a fully commissioned police officer in 2018. After getting hired and attending the police academy, completing field training, Dan's first patrol assignment was in South Everett in the Casino Road area, the same neighborhood as the Fred Meyer that he had previously worked at. While Dan enjoyed this assignment, His ultimate goal was to work in North Everett, which is where he had first lived after moving to Washington from Las Vegas. In less than a year later, he was able to land his dream assignment working as a day shift patrol officer in North Everett in what we call the 14 beat. Dan was an enthusiastic officer who was eager to learn and would seek out the advice of veteran officers on his crew so he could be the best officer he could be. Although he was a newer officer, he never hesitated to jump right in and welcome handling some of the more difficult and complicated calls for service. It was clear that Dan had an immediate impact on his crewmates. His positive attitude, infectious smile, and calm demeanor were all traits that endeared him to his coworkers and to anyone who met him. Dan was a knowledgeable, competent, and hardworking officer who leveraged his outstanding communication skills to connect with a variety of different people with whom he'd come into contact with while on patrol. Dan came into police work a little later than most, but he used his life experience to his advantage. It was this life experience that allowed him to connect with people in ways that not all of us can. It didn't matter who you were. He treated you with compassion, kindness, and understanding. Dan was never afraid to show anyone the man behind the badge, the husband, the father, the son, because he was proud of who he was and what he stood for. One of the stories I learned of after Dan's death involved a woman who he had arrested for a minor assault. As Dan always did, he struck up a conversation with her during the investigation and built a positive rapport with her. But knowing he had a job to do, he did ultimately place her under arrest, but he did so in a dignified and respectful manner. And on the way to jail, they spoke more. They talked about life, their families, their children. Dan let her know how much his family and his sons meant to him. The woman was touched by this kindness, by the kindness that Dan showed her. And although she was very sad that she was not going to be able to go home that night to see her own children, she understood that Dan was just doing his job. So after being at the jail for about an hour and going through the intake process, she was surprised to see Dan reappear again, walking towards her. She thought to herself, what is he still doing here? I know he was already past his shift and he was eager to get home to his family. She never expected to hear what came next. Dan said that he had been thinking about her situation and what had happened, and he knew he wouldn't be able to sleep that night, knowing that she was in jail. So he went to his supervisor and obtained approval to issue her a citation instead of booking her into jail. Hearing this news, she was overcome with emotion by Dan's kindness and empathy. In tears, she asked him if this meant she was going to be able to go home to see her babies. And Dan smiled in the way that we all know Dan smiles, and he looked at her and he said, yes, you're going home to see your babies tonight. This experience changed this woman's life forever. But for all of us who knew Dan, we would just say that this is who he was. He always did what was right, and he saw people for who they were and where they were at, regardless of their situation. Most important in Dan's life was his family. They held a special place in his heart. His wife, Kelly, 2 sons, Thomas and Harrison, and his large, loving, extended family. After spending time with them, I can certainly see why they were all so special to him. If Dan was with his family, he was right where he wanted to be. Whether it was watching Spider-Man or the Avengers or any other Marvel movie, attending a practice or a game with his boys, or walking the dog after work with Kelly, his love for his wife, his 2 sons, and family was immense. To Thomas and Harrison, your dad loved you both so much. He always had a twinkle in his eye and a boasting, prideful smile when he would talk about you with his coworkers. You were his everything. And Dan was a lifelong learner, something he wanted to pass on to both Thomas and Harrison. Dan shared his love for museums with his sons. Kelly said it wouldn't be unusual for Dan to wake up in the morning and at the spur of the moment just say, hey, I'm taking the boys and we're going to go to Canada today to visit a museum. He did this because it was important to Dan to not only enrich his own mind and self, but the minds of his two sons through exposure to new and different information and experiences. And of course, Dan loved sports, as you can see. There was no place he'd rather be than at a practice or a game with his sons. Dan himself was an avid sports fan, following World Cup soccer, the 49ers, the Dodgers, and most recently, the Seattle Kraken. But Dan's love for sports didn't end with just the understanding of the physical aspects of the game. He truly wanted to learn the games themselves. If Dan's sons were interested in a sport that he wasn't familiar with, he would first research it, learn all the rules, the common jargon, and everything else he could. This not only helped him better understand the game himself, but was just another way for him to stay connected to his boys and be a part of their lives. And then there were the family vacations. And these weren't like your typical family vacations. They weren't about rest and relaxation. They were about packing as many activities as you could into a week and experiencing and learning life together as a family. Dan planned family vacations down to the very last detail. His philosophy was every vacation would have a learning component, and you were going to see something that you had never seen before. When I asked Dan's family about these vacations, the one word that quickly came to mind was exhausting. They always had amazing times and treasured the many wonderful memories they made together as a family. To Dan's family, wife Kelly, sons Thomas, Harrison, dads Charlie and Mike, sisters Morgan and Ray, and the entire Rocha family, I'm so sorry for your loss. For our loss. Dan was a true hero who sacrificed his own personal safety to protect others. He will be missed, but never forgotten. I make this promise to you. We will all be here, all 250 plus members of the Everett Police Department and their families, to stand by you, to support you, and to love you as we walk this difficult road together. So as we lay our hero to rest today, let us never forget who Dan was and what he meant to his family, to the Everett Police Department, and to this community. Dan represented the best of the best, the one who would always lend a hand to anyone in need, the one who respected the badge and was proud of what it represented, and the one who was willing to lay his life on the line to protect the community he loved so dearly. We will never forget you, Dan. Rest in peace, my friend.
Thank you, Chief. Our next speaker today will be the Mayor of the City of Everett, Cassie Franklin.
Thank you all for being here with us today. My heart is heavy and hurting with all of you as we gather together to grieve the loss and honor the memory of our dedicated and beloved officer, Dan Rocha, who died in the line of duty protecting our community. Everett is grieving. This tragedy has shaken our community to its core, and I've been trying to find the words to articulate the pain that we're all experiencing, and I'm failing. Words are woefully inadequate to describe the senseless loss, and I know each one of you here, sadly, understands that far too well. My heart and deepest sympathies are with all of Dan's family and loved ones, especially his wife, Kelly, and his two sons, Thomas and Harrison. And my thoughts are also with Dan's police family, who lost their brother, their colleague, and their friend. I may not know the depth of your loss, but my heart is with you in grief. The role of being a police officer has grown dramatically as you, our officers, keep the peace, fight crime, and protect the community. You are also acting as social workers, as coaches, mentors, and caregivers. You who wear the badge are the ones we turn to when we feel unsafe. You are ready at any moment to run toward danger, not knowing what kind of person or situation you're going to find, but bravely putting your lives on the line for all of us. You are our guardians. Officer Dan Rocha was that guardian. Dan took care of his beat. He recognized the importance of knowing those in his community and understood their individual needs and concerns. He protected our neighborhoods. He helped those in need. Like the chief, I have heard many stories of how Dan went above and beyond in our community, from local health care providers who commended him for his calming presence, to stories from a family grateful for his kindness and compassion when he contacted their disabled, distraught son. Dan treated all with dignity, value, and respect. This past week, we've received an outpouring of emails, calls, and letters filled with love and support for Officer Rocha. Many shared stories of his everyday work, which illustrated his strength, his kindness, and his integrity. These notes have allowed me to truly get to know the kind of character Dan exhibited and the love and pride he had for his uniform and for our community. As a city family, we mourn his loss, and we are so very grateful for the positive impact he's forever made. To Officer Rocha's family and to all the families of law enforcement who are here, thank you for your service and sacrifice. We know that each day when our officers put on their uniforms to protect and serve, you, parents, children, spouses, and close friends are serving with them. We know the love and support you share gives them the strength needed to be here for us when we need them most. And a special thank you to our Everett police family. You serve with honor, integrity, and professionalism. I want to thank every one of you who serves or has served in law enforcement for your courage and for your dedication to your community. You make the world a better, safer place. You stand between good and evil. You protect us from harm. As the community learned of the senseless loss of life, I had to explain what happened to my own daughter, who is close in age to Dan's sons. She, like so many in our city, was asking what, how, why did this happen? I told her simply, Officer Rocha was doing his job to keep us safe. Dan got up in the morning, put on his uniform, and went to work. And his job is to be brave, to be strong, to protect, and do what needed to be done to keep us safe. And that's exactly what Dan did. We have lost a hero, a friend, a brother, a son, husband, and father. Dan touched so many lives and will forever be missed. Thank you, Dan. We will never forget your sacrifice.
Thank you, Mayor, for those words. Next, we are going to hear from Officer Rocha's father, Michael Henry.
I know some of you may be wondering, what's with the red shoes? Well, there's a story behind this. Ever since Dan was probably early high school, he had the same size foot that I did. And whenever, he was also kind of a sneaker aficionado, I guess you'd call it. And he would buy the best new pair of sneakers, wear them for a little while. He'd get tired of them, and then he'd put them away. Well, luckily for me, he would give them to me when I would come up to visit. And so I would get all these shoes. And teaching high school in Las Vegas, the students would come up to me and say, "Hey, cool shoes, Mr. Henry." I'd say, "Yeah, thanks, Dan." These shoes he ordered, and they came in the day after. So I wear them now. I want to thank everybody, the incredible turnout of this community, and for sharing this time with Dan's family. I want to thank the Behind the Badge Foundation, as well as the Everett Police Department and all the amazing officers. I'm Mike Henry, and I'm Danny's dad number 2. I was lucky to meet Danny and his mom when he was about 4. He was a special kid, and he's very kind, sensitive. He liked to grow strawberries. He liked tulips. They were his favorite flower. And he liked to make stuff. He also loved sports. Started him in soccer, and he excelled. I was playing ice hockey at the time in a men's league, and he would come to watch, and he was hooked. He had to play. So I got him involved in ice hockey, and I was lucky enough to be able to coach his teams. And it was a lot of great times and stories as he grew up through the different age levels, travel teams. And then when he turned 18, I was able to get him on my men's league team so we could be defensive partners together. That was the thrill of my ice hockey experience. We're lucky to have one of his oldest friends and also teammates in Adam, one of the pallbearers. He's also with the FBI. And the two of them were definitely a force to be reckoned with out on the ice. Dan showed at an early age his protective instincts. I remember one time, Melanie and myself went to the principal's office after school and said, "What's going on?" Danny said, "Well, there was a big kid picking on a little kid, and I stepped in and took care of it." Now, the school policy is there's absolutely no fighting. But when we got him back in the car, we said he did the right thing. He'd take care of kids that are smaller and weaker. Dan always wanted to matter. He had a singular dedication to becoming a police officer. His friend Mike, who's also here, is a police officer in Las Vegas. And he can tell you stories about he and Danny at the MGM Grand. And he'll tell you that Dan was more like a big brother than a friend. I see in his son Harrison his impish grin and laughter. I see in his son Thomas a quest for adventure and discovery. I see in his loving wife Kelly a perfect match, a great mom, and just plain fun. And that his dad Charlie. Sometimes it's hard to share a child when you're growing up. I'm forever grateful that Charlie gave me that chance. And I know my daughter Morgan will never forget her big protective brother. As a parent, my first reaction when I heard about Dan was that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Upon further reflection, I knew that Dan would say he was in the perfect place at the perfect time to do what he does, serve and protect, and make a better world for his kids. My heart is crushed, but I'm a proud dad. Thank you.
Thank you for helping all of us get to know Dan a little better. Our next speaker is going to be Matt Nicholas. He is Officer Rocha's brother-in-law.
All right, let's see how this goes. There's a lot more of you looking this way than when I'm sitting down. I'd like to thank the mayor, the chief, Mr. Mike. I was doing great, and then you got up here, but I appreciate you. So as we've all heard, Dan is a wonderful person, an extremely hard worker, and a loyal friend of many. We've been a part of each other's lives for 20 years or so. It was funny, my first trip with him, I was with my sister and my wife, and we were going to California, going like 80 miles an hour. And Dan's like, hey, I bet you $20 you can't hit a street sign with an orange. I can do that, sunroof's open. Go ahead, give it a toss, and that didn't even come close. Dan's laughing at me. I'm like, I probably should stand up so I could throw better against the wind. Yeah, not so much, but if you're gonna be dumb, you gotta be tough, so kept trying. And Dan's just laughing at me the whole time, and that was Dan. If he liked you, he messed with you. And he was good at it. He could get you. He was there for me when I was stationed, when I was in the Marine Corps and I went to Iraq. He stayed. He protected my wife and my sister while I was gone. He had a lot of jobs. He loved to talk about them. He enjoyed working hard. No idea what he was talking about half the time. I don't know what throwing Fred at Fred Meyer means, but he'd sure tell me in detail and be very proud of it. I'm like, cool. I don't know what that means, but good job, bud. All right. Then became parking enforcement. That sounds boring, but he did his best, and he worked hard. Always stories, but I never heard him talk with the passion and excitement as when he became a cop. He truly loved it. I don't even know why I'm in this speech. All right. Becoming a cop was probably the missing link in his life, that he got to where he wanted to be. The only thing he talked about with more love and passion is when he talked about Kelly and the boys. He truly loved them. Something I've learned this week, I mean, I've learned it before, but it's really driven home now, is time is a fleeting thing. We don't know how much we have in this life. As terrible as a tragedy as this is, Dan was there doing his job that day, right where he wanted to be. He understood that life was meant to be lived to the fullest, and he ensured that his family knew his undying love for them. And all his adventures, he wanted his family with him. We can feel loss, and we can feel sorrow. We can feel an absence, and we can lean on each other. Remember and honor Dan the way he deserved. But we must not wallow in our grief. The best thing that we can do to honor Dan is to live life to the fullest the same way Dan did. Dan was a son, a husband, a father, a friend, and a brother. He was my brother. We will never forget you. Rest easy, Danny. We have the watch.
God bless you and keep you. God make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. God lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.
Flag detail. Post. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise. Honor Guard, uniform personnel, present arms! Order! Arms!
SOCOM Everett 214. Everett 214, Officer Dan Rocha. Out of service, gone, but not forgotten.
Retire the colors! Color guard, halt! Land, haste! Honor Guard, uniform personnel, present arms! Order! Arms! Colors, ready? Retreat. Color guard, right, haste. Honor guard. Inboard. Face. Pallbearer detail. Post. Honor guard, uniformed personnel, present, up! Order! Arms! The audience may be seated. Honor guard! Ready! Front! Ceremonial! About face! Forward! March!
All right, and we are watching the memorial honoring the life of Officer Dan Rocha, a police officer out of Everett, who was killed in the line of duty.
We have with us Shannon Sessions from Behind the Badge Foundation, which is a nonprofit that supports the departments and the families of fallen officers as they go through these horrible tragedies. I know there wasn't a dry eye in the house there, a packed Angel of the Winds arena there, and it's such a difficult thing, but also, Shannon, it's so helpful for the community and for the department to heal, to be able to hear these things about this man. And you know, we found out about his time working at Fred Meyer, his life experiences before even becoming parking enforcement and then an Everett police officer.
Yes, when they moved up from Las Vegas, he'd first gotten a job there at the Fred Meyer at Casino Road, and that area there is a neighborhood with a lot of it needs, high needs, and apparently Dan was really a light there, and as assistant manager, just very available to people, and just like what you've heard about, talked about today, and a protector even then at the store, and to have, you know, the store manager look out for you when you're a customer or a community member. That's really special. It really tells about his integrity.
It just goes to how embedded Officer Rocha was in the Everett community. Didn't grow up there, but certainly a part of the fabric of the community, knew a lot of people. And as we heard, he was in the right place at the right time, maybe keeping somebody else from getting killed, absolutely sacrificing his life. The guy who killed him had been contacted by Kennewick police 368 times. So this was a man who was familiar to law enforcement and was a dangerous person. And this is why these heroes are out there on the front lines defending us. And you just never know, right, when it's going to happen this way. I heard an officer the other day tell me that, I said, how are you doing? Because he was out on patrol in Everett. And I said, what's it like? He said, people look at me and they don't know what to say. I can tell they want to say something to me, but they don't know what to say. And I said, well, I'm going to tell them on television to come up and just thank you for doing your job, and just saying, hey, I heard about your brother that got killed, and I'm sorry. It can be as simple as that, right, Shannon?
Absolutely, it can. And just like you said, David, I think one of the moments that was just so poignant for me during the service was when Mike Henry said, you know, a lot of people are saying, you know, that maybe he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that Dan would tell him, no, he said, I was at the perfect place at the perfect time to serve and protect, to make this a better world for my kids. And, you know, I think that that's such a theme, not only for Officer Rocha, but for so many of our officers who are still willing and able, physically, mentally, emotionally, be available for us and to protect us, because that's what they're called to do. And they're there on a purpose, and just like Officer Rocha was.
You have such great perspective, too, being with Behind the Badge. You had brought up the flag itself and just the way it's placed on the casket, and the stars being close to his heart. What is the meaning of that?
Well, it's just all those little things that are so symbolic. Again, some things that are on camera, some things that are off camera, that are taken into consideration to honor a person who served us so well and sacrificed their life. Is that it's things like that. And of course, these are military traditions that go way, way back. It's not something we created or invented for officer or firefighter lines of death of duty. But these are things that are meaningful because of what they mean and what the flag means to us and us as Americans.
Yeah, we heard from Everett's Police Chief Dan Templeman there, and I had an opportunity to sit down with him a few weeks ago. And this is a man who really leads through enthusiasm, loves his department, and it really shows. But we talked to him last night, and I want to play a little bit of that sound for you, because all of this outpouring of support, I want you to hear what that means for those officers as they go forth from today. So let's take a listen to that.
It's uplifting, and the officers feel it. They feel it in their hearts. They feel this support. They see it in the eyes of the people that have been stopping by here, and the families and the community members. It's the strength that we're drawing from right now to help us get through this terrible time.
You know, I'll give you an example. There was an officer who was speaking with some of the kids who were witnesses to the horrible tragedy and was just helping them grieve. And he told me that he told them it was okay to cry, and then he started crying, and they were crying together. And it's okay to feel sad, right? But also to honor what Officer Rocha has done for the community. And, you know, with the way things are right now, God forbid we have another one of these, but it's a very real possibility. But having these, I think, is so important to showing people that there is a vocal minority, or a minority of people who don't normally say something, come forward and voice their opinion in support of law enforcement. They do appreciate it. Look, nobody wants to get a ticket. Nobody likes to see the lights behind them, right? But if they're not out there defending us every single day, it could have been one of us that got killed and not Officer Rocha.
And we heard so many people today call him the protector, right? That was the word we heard over and over again, calling him the protector, and just how much this responsibility meant to him, this calling that he felt the need to answer. And you were talking too about how he's never been alone, right? They never left him alone.
That's right.
Let's talk a little bit about that.
Casket watch, another one of the traditions, but particularly important in a line of duty death. From the moment Officer Rocha was killed to the moment he's here now, there's been an officer, a honor guard member, casket watch with him nearly 24 hours, the entire time.
The Behind the Badge Foundation has been a long supporter in our state. People may have heard it from time to time, but coincidentally, your banquet is coming up that you have every year, and it's coming up on Saturday, and you read the names of all the officers. I've been doing it several years. I hosted it for you guys one year, and nobody can keep from crying. I mean, that list is so long, but it's so important. But the last two memorials, Dom Colada and then this one, these were really the first two we'd had since the pandemic, right? People hadn't been together to do this. And so I think just being able to share in the grief, do you think this is helpful?
Right, and we did have one other, Don Sahota in Vancouver earlier in the year as well. And you're right, with this happening on Saturday, the ball and auction, there were some moments, I think, during this process, can we pull this off with all of this happening? But we do have wonderful volunteers and people who are putting this together, and I can imagine that event will be particularly poignant.
Yeah, because the deaths are so close to when you're actually holding it. And so certainly our thoughts will be with all the different departments, and they come from all over the state to be at that event. As they go through the rest of today, all of those cards, all those flowers will be gathered up. And I know at the right time, the family will sit down and read through all of those messages. They won't respond, I wouldn't think, but they would have an opportunity for the kids and his wife to go through them and to see the support if they haven't already taken a look at them. I know they were out there last night, but there's a lot.
There's a lot. And even that is part of the process, and making sure that all those things are gathered and cared for and checked for security purposes. And so that is also part of what Behind the Badge does as well, to help protect and kind of wrap a hedge of protection around this family during this time.
How does Behind the Badge also continue to support families through this process? Because it's not something that's going to, be complete in a day, in a week, in a month. This is really something, you are a family. So how do you continue this relationship?
So Behind the Badge has different members who focus on caring for the survivors after this. And, sometimes you have to just ask and think, who is it that needs best served right now? It could be the spouse, it could be a child, or it could be maybe a family member of a department member. And no matter who it is, they continue just to walk alongside them and gently, sometimes it's even a silent presence, to be there to kind of minister to them and to be near them, to walk through the next steps, whatever that looks like. They also provide different events, fun events. Of course, we do different fundraisers along the way, but we incorporate how we can bring those families into it, and especially honoring their officer in whatever way that was meaningful to them, because each one is completely different. Each family is completely different. Each dynamic is different. Each department and their culture is different. And so we just come alongside and we let them take the lead, particularly the family, and we're just there to help.
Yeah, well, certainly we hope that this memorial means as much to the family, because that's what it's all about, as it has meant to the department and to the people who watched, that the family comes away knowing that their loved one was appreciated and that his sacrifice was honored. So Shannon Sessions from Behind the Badge, thank you so much for being with us today. We appreciate it.
It's a privilege. Thank you.
Before we go, if you would like to donate to Officer